I have it on subscription, so if you're having trouble sleeping or you want to catch up on your, you can call, and it's just me going. $9.99 a month. Support your local jazz club. Hello and welcome to another sold out show at the Velvet Note! So, weren't y'all watching television? Oh my gosh. Justin's gonna have to be really entertaining. The Velvet Note's a place where you can see and hear world-class musicians in a setting that's as intimate and as comfortable as your living room. We give you a chance to get to know the musicians and to hear the music the way that it was meant to be heard. We're a listening room. We had our acoustics designed by a protege of the Hollywood director George Lucas under his guidance to be the highest quality, unenhanced sound available today. And we've been here almost 9 years now. Let me tell you, every day I get up and I say, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you so much to you all and the support that you've given us. It's quite an adventure here at the Velvet Note. I drove to work today early, and there was a 20-person film crew in front of our door waiting to film something that I didn't know they were going to film. So it's just like, oh yeah, we're all that in a bag of chips. If you need a music scene for your movie, there's no place else than the Velvet Note. It's fabulous. So speaking of fabulous and no place else, an opportunity to hear a live performance of Miles Davis's most iconic album. Tom Brady ain't got nothing on us, right? This is all being presented by Justin Varnes, who's put together Legends of Jazz, which gives you an opportunity to hear and watch being performed great pieces of music, the life's work of certain iconic jazz musicians, and in this case, albums in their entirety. And that's what he's going to do tonight. He has on piano Philip Adair. Give Philip a hand. He's got some big shoes. Grammy Award-winning upright bassist Kevin Smith. Blowing his horn as usual, it's John Sandfort. And playing the role of Miles Davis will be Justin Powell. Put your hands together for Legends of Jazz presents Miles Davis's Roundabout Midnight!
Ladies and gentlemen, John Sandfort's saxophone is sitting on my drum set. Now may I proceed, John? All right.
Yeah, that's my one mic drop of the evening. One, two, oh,
Thank you all so much. That tune is entitled Tad's Delight, and it's written by Tad Dameron, the great pianist and composer. It's featured on this album we're going to highlight tonight, and it's one of the tunes, one of many tunes that were pretty much a nod to one of Miles Davis's mentors, which was Tad Dameron. Before we go any further, please help me thank and welcome Mr. Justin Powell on the trumpet. A very well-hydrated John Sandfort on the tenor saxophone. And a young man we're very impressed with so far. Please help me welcome Mr. Philip Adair on the piano. And back here helping me shovel the coal, as they say, Mr. Kevin Smith on the bass. So, for those of you who were here last month, I set up the first song of the last show, talking about how, we usually like to have an album that has like a lot of amazing things happen all together, this sort of confluence of events that changed the course of jazz history, and that certainly was not the record we did last time. It was more of a jam session record, and it was really about how great storytellers can get together at the drop of a hat and make great music and listen to great musical conversation. This record, however, is all of that and more. This was pretty much, it essentially turned Miles's career around and in effect reshaped jazz history. So it's the summer of 1955. It's during the Newport Jazz Festival, and I think it's the second or third night, and it's getting toward the main events. Count Basie's band had just performed on the main stage, and they were moving all of the equipment off the main stage to set up for the main act, which was the Dave Brubeck Quartet. While that's happening, some jazz festivals do this thing, where onto the side of the stage, they'll have a group of players perform just to basically kill time while the main event, while everybody's rapping chords and moving drum sets and all that sort of stuff. So that group was kind of a thrown together jam session band. It included Zoot Sims and Percy Heath on bass and Kenny Clark on drums and Thelonious Monk on piano. Matter of fact, Duke Ellington, who was the MC that year, introduced everybody, and he eventually got around to introducing Miles Davis. And this was, in effect, the first time people had seen Miles in a while. At that time, he came up playing with Charlie Parker in the mid to late 40s, and then he had a big hit in 1949 with Birth of the Cool. But after that, Miles struggled a lot, personally and professionally, and kind of had fallen off the scene. And when Miles walked up on stage to kind of sit in with the jam session band, first of all, it was so last minute that Miles's name wasn't even in the program as being part of this jam session band. But the story goes that people in the audience thought they had seen a ghost. They had almost forgotten Miles Davis was around. Miles Davis was already tagged to be part of the bygone bebop era of the 40s. So he gets up there and he plays, and he sounds amazing. And they only play 3 short songs. They're just like jam session tunes while the stage is switching over. And by the time the 3rd jam session song is done, they got a standing ovation, which the jam session band hardly ever does. They're just supposed to be like, killing time, if you will. Well, what happened is, in particular, of the 3 songs they played, the middle song was Thelonious Monk's Round Midnight. And the solo and the interpretation that Miles put on that one song blew everyone away. Reportedly, every article that was written about the Newport Jazz Festival mentioned Miles' solo on Round Midnight. And in the audience was a record exec for Columbia Records. And this was important because Columbia was just starting to launch their jazz series, and Miles had been wanting to move up the chain and get on a major label. He wasn't on a major label at that point. And the story goes that by the time they finished the third song, this label exec named George Avakian, which we're going to talk about just a little bit, was already backstage and met Miles and said, we're going to get together this weekend, we're going to get you signed onto this label. A lot of great things happened because of that. His relationship with Columbia Records spawned Kind of Blue and Miles Ahead, Porgy and Bess, Bitches Brew. All of Miles's incredible records happened through this deal. And there's a lot of specific things that Columbia brought. Most importantly, Miles was a great trumpet player, but what he really was a great orchestrator, a great arranger. He could hear the whole thing in his head if he just had enough time to sit down with each of his band members and teach them all of their parts. And Columbia afforded him that time. They had multiple rehearsals, and through that we get to really hear Miles's vision, not just as a trumpet player, but as an artist. So this record was the beginning of that fruitful career. One of those tunes that features some more specific things versus just kind of the jam session thing that a lot of people were doing at the time is a tune we're going to play next. This is entitled Dear Old Stockholm. Now, this was a feature for Miles's bassist, Paul Chambers. Miles usually had one song in a set that was a bass feature. Later in his career, it became the tune Walkin', but for now, it was Dear Old Stockholm. So we're going to use that as our cue and feature Mr. Kevin Smith on the first solo. Here is our interpretation of Miles's interpretation of Dear Old Stockholm.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much. So I'd mentioned how Columbia was going to represent this kind of upgrade for Miles, in that Miles was just as equally talented as an orchestrator and an arranger, and a manager of musicians, if you will, as he is a trumpet player. So the early record labels he was on, Prestige and Riverside, these were more independent labels with not very big budgets. And because of that, Miles, when he wanted to make a recording, they didn't give him any money to get together and rehearse. So he couldn't pay his musicians ahead of time to rehearse and bring in all of these, complex arrangements and these specific sounds. He pretty much just had to go into the recording session that day and hope that they can get a pretty good capture of his music. So Columbia said, no, we're gonna give you that time. We're gonna pay your musicians to rehearse. What do you need to make a great record? And so what happened was that he brought in not only his own really good ideas, but he had the collaborator he worked closely with for Birth of the Cool, he kind of reunited with, and that's Gil Evans. And Gil and Miles would go on to do great things together. They recorded Sketches of Spain together, Porgy and Bess, Miles Ahead, these great records. But on this particular record, he actually brought Gil Evans in to arrange the title track, Round Midnight. What happened was, I'd mentioned that Miles's version of Round Midnight really kind of blew everyone away, and that's what got George Avakian to run back there and sign him. It was actually his brother, who was a photographer, that basically started elbowing him like during the middle of Miles's Round Midnight solo and said, go sign this guy right now before somebody else does. Because they heard something unique. What they heard was that Miles, when he was playing a ballad, and in particular, when he was playing a ballad with a harmon mute, as Justin Powell is holding up right there, that's that amazing sound, it had a mass appeal, they thought. They thought the bebop that he played with Charlie Parker was amazing stuff, but they thought Miles could reach a larger audience, and that they actually saw him as the next Louis Armstrong. Somebody that you didn't have to know anything about jazz to go, wow, I really like that. I want to hear more of that. And I think they were spot on in that assessment. So they really wanted to feature Miles doing Round Midnight on this record, and Miles reached out to his dear friend Gil and said, can you help me put together kind of a special arrangement on this? And that's exactly what this is. An amazing arrangement by Gil, and it's a great interpretation by Miles as well. So we're going to do this tune for you right now. This is Thelonious Monk's Round Midnight, arranged by Gil Evans, interpreted by Miles Davis.
Interpreted by One, two, three.
Sandfort. Yes, sir. Yes, indeed. So that was the centerpiece of that record and really helped catapult Miles into, that was the beginning of him turning into an international superstar, somebody that would end up on talk shows and become a huge celebrity. And a lot of it had to do with that ability for Columbia to say, you know, we hear something special in what you're doing, and we're going to give you all the support you need to create that artistry with us. So it was great that Columbia wanted to do that for him. This was in 1955. The only issue is Miles was still in the middle of a recording contract at the time with Prestige Records. I've told this story once before. It's kind of fascinating how it all went down. Basically, Columbia negotiated with Prestige and said, listen, we really want to sign Miles. I know he still has 4 records left on his contract with you. What can we work out? And Prestige and Columbia worked it out that, Prestige's idea was, as long as Miles recorded those records, then they were going to be fine, because once Columbia got hold of Miles and Columbia's promotion and marketing team got hold of Miles, that means all those records he made for Prestige were going to start selling out. And that's exactly what happened. So all those Prestige Miles records took off only after he signed with Columbia. But Miles had 4 records to record before he could move over to Columbia. So Miles said, well, you've never paid me for rehearsals for my recordings anyway, right? Okay, so me and the fellas are going to show up on this Wednesday and Thursday, and we're going to record 4 albums worth of material. Just don't stop the tape. Just run it, and we're just going to play tune. How many tunes do we need? Okay, we need 42 tunes. Okay, I'm going to count off, and we're just going to play. And if you listen carefully to those records, it's and they're also, you can find the 4 very easily, because they're all called almost the same thing. Cooking with the Miles Davis Quintet, Steaming with the Miles Davis Quintet, Relaxing with the Miles Davis Quintet, and I always forget the 4th one. Working with the Miles Davis Quintet. They're all basically titled the same thing. And if you listen carefully, at the beginning and end of almost each track, they don't even complete songs. And Miles is like, that's good, okay, next. And there's a couple tunes he counts off and they don't start right, and Miles just doesn't care. He just stops them and starts them before they can hit the record button again. But it is still amazing, because you get to hear these musicians react like that, and with no rehearsal, no anything. But luckily that deal got ironed out, and then Miles was able to go on and do this record for Columbia. We're going to do another tune right now. I'd mentioned that there are several nods to his mentors. His old boss, Charlie Parker, who helped Miles get his break. Back in 1948, Miles recorded this really hip tune with Charlie Parker entitled A Lucha, and we're going to do that tune for you right now. One of the cool things about this tune is that Charlie Parker studied classical counterpoint, and he was obsessed with how expertly woven these great classical melodies were, and he tried to write a lot of tunes like that. This is one of those tunes where you're going to hear 2 melodies at once, kind of in counterpoint, by John and Justin. They're going to weave these 2 melodies together. And then one thing that Miles did was he had his pianist, Red Garland, not play during those counterpoint parts so that you can clearly hear them. This is something that Ornette Coleman would pick up on later on. If you listen to Ornette Coleman's band, you'll hear counterpoint melodies between the saxophone and trumpet, and then no piano. So Miles going from Charlie Parker to Miles, and then eventually passing that on to Ornette Coleman. It's a cool sound, and we're going to play for you right now. This is entitled A Lucha. have played an extra note at the end of that song that we're supposed to be there. We're not sure of that yet, but since it's my band, I'm going to say that I was intentional. I definitely wanted to play that note.
Yeah, definitely our fault. Sorry.
Definitely wanted to put an exclamation point on that song. You see, normally Kevin is constantly complaining during the gig, and usually you guys can see it, but you can't see it right now. Unless you look very carefully in the eyes, you can see it. You can see the pain and the suffering. Yeah. It keeps him out of trouble, though. That's probably good, at least back here. So, yeah. Another person who had an interesting indirect influence in two different ways on this recording is Mitch Miller. Mitch Miller became the head of A&R at Columbia Records a few years before Miles was signed. And Mitch wanted to find a really good studio, a really good recording studio for the sound of Columbia. So they went through and they went to all these different buildings, and he always had his. So the bookkeepers of Columbia were always trying to find the best deals. They were trying to get him to get some like old dilapidated building, right? So they took him to this old dilapidated building, and he brought his sound engineers with him. And they came in and they walked around and they tested things, and they came back to Mitch and they said, "This is the spot, but you can't touch anything. Like, don't bring a cleaning crew in. Don't take any of that like terrible looking stuff off the walls. Right now, it is acoustically perfect. We can do amazing things in this building, but you can't don't bring a cleaning crew in. Don't paint it. Don't do anything, or you're gonna mess it up." So Mitch said, "Okay, we'll take it." But to the basically the head of Columbia, he wrote it in his contract. You cannot change this studio. And what happened was that some amazing sounding records came out of those Columbia sessions in the 50s and 60s, and it's exactly the classical records from that same studio, even some pop records as well. They're just beautiful sounding, and it really fit Miles's group well. You could hear all the detail in the playing. Miles's trumpet sounded nice and warm. And then Mitch eventually retired in 1965, and apparently like a week after he retired, they went in and they repainted and cleaned up and made it all shiny and brand new looking, and Columbia Records never sounded the same. So, but during that period, it helped shape the sound that everyone heard Miles in. The other way that Mitch kind of indirectly contributed to this is after World War II, a lot of people gravitated toward Mitch Miller's music and the sound of basically some like carefree music after the heaviness of the war. And what happened after that was that kind of broke the stride of a lot of the jazz tunes that were being written. And what happened in the mid to late 50s and into the 60s was this renaissance where people wanted to hear the old pop tunes from the 30s and 40s. They wanted to hear Cole Porter again, and they wanted to hear Duke Ellington again. And it was part of the reason that Frank Sinatra's career basically had a resurgence in the 50s and 60s, is that people wanted to hear these old style popular tunes. And Miles was a big fan of those tunes too. So Miles started recording some popular tunes from Broadway, like from decades past, like Bye Bye Blackbird is on this record. And the next song we're going to play, which is a Cole Porter classic entitled All of You. On this tune, he gives another nod to one of his mentors, the great pianist Ahmad Jamal. There's a lot of little things that happened inside the arrangement that were a special tip to Ahmad Jamal. One of the things in particular that I want to point out to you guys is that I told you that Miles was this great orchestrator and arranger. Well, sometimes it was on paper, but other times it was just in his ensemble assignments. One of the things that Miles loved was to pair the harmonium with the sound of the brushes. So there's all these great records where Miles is playing the harmonium and then the drummer is on brushes, and then when Miles stops playing and it goes to Coltrane, then all of a sudden the drummer goes to sticks and the whole sound changes. And so we're going to do a little example of that for you right now. So here's Miles Davis's interpretation of the great Cole Porter classic, All of You. Justin Powell. Normally, I'd love to have Justin come back, but I have a strict one Justin policy in my band. So, sorry about that. Unless you want to be Jason Powell, I'm just saying, because you can go that way.
Who's the last guy you called? It's okay.
I called all the other Justins before you, just so you know. So we've got time for one more tune. I wanted to mention that Miles was with Columbia Records for 30 years. Pretty much all the great Miles Davis records you can think of, Kind of Blue, as I said, Miles Ahead, Porgy and Bess, Sketches of Spain, all the stuff he did with like Herbie Hancock and Ron Carter, all those great records like ESP, and even into the Fusion days for Bitches Brew, and all that great music was all created there in Columbia Studios. So if it weren't for that fateful night where Miles just happened to shuffle on stage with the jam session band and try to play a couple of choruses in between the big acts of the jazz festival, jazz might have been very different. It would have been very different possibly for another reason, because I had mentioned that Miles had struggled personally and professionally kind of coming out of the late 1940s and early 1950s. Well, he struggled with drug and alcohol addiction, and what he decided to do in the early 50s was basically go back home to his parents' house and try and kick these habits. And he came back a much stronger person, and his trajectory in jazz obviously skyrocketed from there. That experience no doubt influenced another great artist who was on this Roundabout Midnight record, and that's saxophonist John Coltrane. Miles saw Coltrane going through this same issue in his band around this time in the late 50s. And Miles fired him from the band and sent him home and basically said, "You've got to do what I do. You have to go home and you got to kick this, because there are great things ahead." And obviously, Coltrane's career skyrocketed after that as well. So if not for the huge amount of success that Miles experienced from doing that, he might not have been able to impart that wisdom onto John Coltrane. So this one record, this one 1955 Newport Jazz Festival moment in time really weighs heavily on so much of the great jazz that we love that followed this. So to close out the evening, we're going to do, I mentioned he's doing all these like cool arrangements, and he's really trying to lift the band up. Well, I would say the tour de force on this record is a tune entitled Two Bass Hit. And he actually gives a nod to two people in this. First of all, the composer of this, Mr. John Lewis, ran the great Modern Jazz Quartet for years. And the rhythm section for the Modern Jazz Quartet was Percy Heath and Connie Kay, the bass player and drummer that played with him and backed him up that night at the Newport Jazz Festival. The second person he gives a nod to is his mentor on trumpet, particularly during the bebop days, and that's the great Dizzy Gillespie. The arrangement that you're going to hear of Two Bass Hit, of John Lewis's Two Bass Hit, is in fact kind of an adaptation of Dizzy Gillespie's big band version. So there's a lot of reading on this, so wish us luck. Wish me luck. I have a lot of hard parts in this. And I've been thinking about what I'm going to say and not what it's like to play the drums. So If you hear any errant things, just assume that I was right and the four of them were simultaneously wrong. Once again, Mr. John Sandfort on the tenor saxophone, Justin Powell on the trumpet, Philip Adair on the piano, Kevin Smith on the bass. This is Two Bass Fit.
All right,
Philip Adair, Kevin Smith. My name is Justin Powell. Thank you so much for spending your Sunday evening with us. Hopefully you get to the end of the Super Bowl. And now the owner of this establishment, Miss Tamara Fuller.
That's Legends of Jazz with the Justin Varnes Quintet live at the Velvet Note. Thank you so much for joining us. We loved having you, and we would love to have you again. You can find all of our upcoming shows at thevelvetnote.com. Next weekend is a major holiday. Does anybody know what it is? I can't quite remember. President's Day. So good. So good. So, if you can't make it out to the Velvet Note for President's Day weekend, I have a special gift for you. You can stream our shows live with a weekend pass. You can find it on our website. And you can also order a gourmet meal delivered to your door. Lots of good stuff, including prime rib and other goodies. You can also find that on our website, front page, so you can get fed without leaving your bed. That sounded really good in my head. This is what we love to do, which is to bring you closer to artists to inspire you, closer to each other, and closer to the song that's in your heart. Come back and see us again soon. Good night.